The King Shadow. Chapter 1. The Whispering Earth. The villagers of Ijegba never spoke of the King Shadow after dark. To do so was to invite his wrath, to feel the cold breath of the vengeful spirit at your back. Even the elders, who claimed to have seen many seasons, averted their eyes when the name was mentioned. But whispers always found a way to slip through cracks. Ola ran through the narrow path between the huts, his bare feet kicking up dust. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the oil lamps flickered in the warm night breeze. He had been gone too long at the river, and now his mother would scold him. As he reached the wooden threshold of his home, he froze. A shadow moved at the edge of the compound. Not a normal shadow cast by the moon, but something thicker, darker, something wrong. It did not sway like a palm tree or stretch like a man's figure. It stood still, watching. Ola swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. He squeezed his eyes shut and whispered a prayer. When he opened them, the shadow was gone. Inside, his mother, Yejidi, stirred a pot of thick soup over the fire. She glanced at him but said nothing of his lateness. Instead, her brow furrowed. "Why do you look like you have seen a spirit?" Ola hesitated. "Mama, does the King Shadow still walk?" The wooden spoon clattered against the pot. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the distant chirping of crickets. Yejidi turned slowly, her dark eyes filled with something he could not name. "We do not speak of such things," she whispered. "But—" She grabbed his arm, squeezing hard. "Never ask that again, do you hear me?" Her voice was sharp, trembling. Ola nodded, his throat dry. That night, as he lay on his mat, he could not shake the feeling that something watched him from the shadows. And far beyond the village, in the depths of the ancient forest, the earth trembled as something old stirred awake. Chapter 2. The Cursed Throne. Long before the white men came, before the land knew iron roads and foreign tongues, there was a king whose name had been carved into history with blood. Oba Olugbade was no ordinary ruler. He was feared, worshipped, and loathed in equal measure. His kingdom stretched beyond the rivers, beyond the hills where the leopards roamed. But his hunger for power had no end. Legend said he had made a pact with something beyond the realm of men. The gods themselves turned away from him. He took what he pleased, destroyed what he wished. And when his own council plotted against him, he crushed them beneath his wrath. But even kings are not eternal. On the night of the great betrayal, his own people rose against him. His most trusted warlord, Adewunmi, led the charge, driving a blade into the Oba's heart. Yet, as the king lay dying, he did not curse the men who killed him. He cursed the land. "You will never be free of me," he had whispered, his blood soaking into the earth. "Even in death I will rule." His body was buried deep in the sacred forest, but his shadow did not rest. It rose from the ground, unseen, unheard, until it was too late. One by one, those who betrayed him met gruesome fates. Their eyes were taken by unseen hands, their tongues ripped from their mouths. Fear gripped the land. And so, the people fled. They left behind the grand palace, the golden thrones, the shrines built for forgotten gods. The kingdom fell to ruin. But the King's shadow remained. Chapter 3. The Omen. Ola awoke to a strange sound in the dead of night, a whisper, soft as the rustling leaves, yet sharp as a blade. He sat up, his skin damp with sweat. The hut was dark, the only light coming from the dying embers of the fire. Then he saw it. At the entrance, where the woven mat hung over the doorway, a shadow stood. It was tall, its shape twisting unnaturally as though it did not belong to this world. "Ola." His breath caught in his throat. The voice was not human. It was layered, like many voices speaking at once, deep, hollow, endless. "Do you know who I am?" Ola could not speak. He wanted to run, to scream, but his body refused to move. The shadow stepped closer. "Your blood remembers me." Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure melted into the darkness. The night was silent once more. But Ola knew that something had changed. The King's shadow had returned. Chapter 5. blood of the fallen. Ola's breath was unsteady, but his mind was clear. He had always felt different, like something heavy rested on his shoulders, something unseen. Now he knew why. He was a descendant of the cursed king. Instead of running, he clenched his fists. "Tell me everything, Mama. No more secrets." Yejide studied him, searching his face. Then, with a deep sigh, she began. "Oba Olugbade was your great ancestor. He was a powerful king, but his greed destroyed him. When his own people betrayed him, he cursed the land with his final breath. His spirit did not pass on. It remained here, in the shadows, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Ola asked. "For his bloodline to reclaim what was his." Ola shivered despite the heat. "You knew all this, and never told me?" "I wanted to protect you," she said softly. "The king's shadow does not rest. He whispers to those who carry his blood. If you listen for too long, he will take you." Ola swallowed. "Then why did he come to me now?" Yejide hesitated, her face grave. "Because something is changing. The curse is stirring, and you are the last of his bloodline." The last? Ola's head spun. He had never known his father. His mother never spoke of him. Was that why? Had he been lost to the curse? Ola exhaled sharply. "I need to see his grave." Yejide's eyes widened. "No." "I have to." She shook her head fiercely. "Ola, you don't understand. His resting place is forbidden. No one who goes there returns the same." "Then I will be the first," Ola said, his voice firm. Yejide searched his face again, but this time she did not try to stop him. Instead, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Then may the ancestors guide you." Chapter 6. The Forbidden Grave. Ola set out before dawn. The forest was thick with mist, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. The path was barely visible, swallowed by time and nature. Every step felt like walking into the past. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. No birds sang, no insects chirped. The silence was alive, pressing against him. Then the trees thinned. Before him lay the ruins of a forgotten palace. The walls were cracked and covered in vines. The once mighty gates had rotted away, leaving only broken wood. But in the center, untouched by time, was a black stone tomb. Ola stepped closer. His pulse roared in his ears. Carved into the stone was a single symbol, the same markings he had seen on the ancient tree. The air grew colder, the ground trembled, and then the whisper returned. "You have come at last." Ola froze. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was deep, hollow, eternal. The shadow began to rise from the ground, taking form. A towering figure cloaked in darkness, eyes burning like dying embers. The king's shadow. Ola clenched his fists. "I know who you are." The spirit laughed, low and menacing. "Then you know what is owed." Ola's throat tightened. "I want the truth." The king's shadow tilted his head. "Truth? You carry my blood, yet you do not know? You were born to finish what I began." Ola took a step back. "I am not you." The spirit's laughter shook the ground. "You cannot escape what runs in your veins. You are the last of my line, and I have been waiting." Ola met the burning gaze of the king's shadow. His heart pounded, but he did not look away. For the first time in generations, the cursed bloodline had returned, and the king's shadow was ready to claim his heir. Chapter 7. The Pact. Ola's blood thrummed like a drumbeat, deep and ancient. The king's shadow loomed before him, a figure of darkness and wrath, waiting. "You would deny your birthright?" the spirit rumbled. Ola's fingers curled into fists. "No, I will claim it." The king's shadow's burning eyes narrowed. "Then kneel." Ola hesitated for only a moment before sinking to one knee. The ground beneath him was cold, pulsing with unseen energy. "You do not fear me?" the king's shadow asked. "I fear being powerless more." A low chuckle echoed through the ruins. "You are wiser than those before you." The spirit reached out, his shadowed hand hovering over Ola's head. "Swear yourself to me, and I will give you what is rightfully yours." Ola lifted his chin. "I swear, but under my own terms." Silence. Then the ground trembled as the King Shadow's form swirled like smoke. "You would bargain with a spirit?" Ola's voice was steady. "I will not be a puppet. I will take your power, but I will wield it my way." The spirit was quiet for a long moment. Then a slow, deep laughter filled the air. "Very well, my descendant. Let us see if you are strong enough to carry my legacy." Darkness surged toward Ola, wrapping around his body like living mist. It seeped into his skin, into his bones, filling him with a power he had never known. It was cold and ancient, but it did not consume him. It bowed to him. The moment passed, and the ruins fell silent. Ola stood, his eyes flashing with something new, something unnatural. The King Shadow's voice rumbled in his mind. "You carry my strength now. Do not waste it." Ola exhaled, steadying himself. He had taken the power of the cursed king, but he would decide how to use it, and he had only just begun. Chapter 8. The Rise of the Forgotten King. Ola stood among the ruins, his heart pounding. Power coursed through his veins, cold, commanding, and ancient. The whispers of the King's shadow echoed in his mind, but they no longer held the weight of control. They were his to command. He turned, taking in the crumbling palace, the remnants of a once great empire. His ancestors' kingdom had fallen to betrayal and time, but he would raise it again. He would reclaim what was lost. Ola stepped forward, raising a hand. The shadows twisted and obeyed. He felt the land tremble beneath his feet, recognizing its rightful ruler. "The kingdom does not belong to dust," he thought. "It belongs to me." But to rebuild, he needed more than power. He needed people. He needed an army. Chapter 9. Gathering the Forsaken. Ola returned to Ijegba with a new presence, one that made the villagers step back in unease. His mother saw the change in his eyes and whispered a prayer under her breath. "You went to his grave," Yejide said, voice tight with fear. Ola nodded. "I have taken his power." Tears filled her eyes. "Then you are lost." "No," he said, stepping closer. "I am found." She reached for him, but he pulled away. "Mama, listen to me. Our people have lived in fear for too long. We have let the past die. But I will bring it back. I will restore our kingdom." Yejid's breath shook. The kingdom was cursed for a reason. Ola's jaw tightened. "Curses are only words. I will make them bend to my will." That night he left the village, moving from settlement to settlement, seeking those who had been cast aside, the descendants of those who once served the Oba. He spoke to outcasts, warriors without a cause, those who longed for power but had been denied it. He told them of the fallen kingdom, of its strength, of its return. Some called him mad. Others knelt, and soon the Forsaken had found a king. Chapter 10. Blood and Rebirth. Under the cover of night, Ola led his followers back to the ruins of the palace. The land groaned beneath their footsteps, as if remembering their ancestors. He stood before the black stone tomb, his hands outstretched. "I call upon the spirits of our bloodline," he declared. "The kingdom of Olugbade shall rise again." The wind howled, and shadows swirled. The King Shadow's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. Ola turned to his followers, his voice ringing through the ruins. "We were cast out, forgotten, left to wither, but no more." His eyes gleamed in the moonlight. "The blood of kings flows through us, and by that blood we reclaim our throne." A roar rose from his people. The ground trembled, and the kingdom of shadows stirred once more. Chapter 11. The Price of Power. Ola stood at the highest point of the ruined palace, looking over the land that once belonged to his ancestors. His followers stood behind him, warriors, seers, and those who had been lost, now found. The kingdom was rising from the dust, but Ola knew this was only the beginning. The King Shadow's voice curled in his mind. "You have done well, but power is never freely given. It must be proven. It must be claimed." Ola clenched his fists. "I have claimed it." "Then take the final step." The wind howled, and the night darkened unnaturally. The presence of the King's shadow thickened, surrounding Ola like a suffocating cloak. The spirit was not done with him. "You are no longer needed," Ola said, voice steady. I have taken your power. The kingdom is mine now." The King Shadow laughed, deep and cold. "Foolish boy, you do not take from me, I take from you." Pain shot through Ola's chest. He gasped, dropping to one knee as the shadows within him churned. His own body rebelled, torn between himself and the lingering will of his ancestor. His followers cried out, unsure of what was happening. But Ola understood. The King Shadow wanted to claim him completely. "You are my vessel," the spirit whispered. "My return." Ola gritted his teeth. He would not be consumed. This was his kingdom, not a prison for a dead king's wrath. With every ounce of strength, he fought back, pushing against the spirit's hold. The air around him crackled. The ruins groaned as the very land seemed to shake from their struggle. Finally, Ola lifted his head, his voice ringing through the darkness. "I am Ola, son of this land, and I am no one's shadow." A scream, deep and unearthly, split the air. The King Shadow twisted, writhing as Ola tore his influence away. The darkness that had bound him for generations shattered like glass, dissolving into the wind. Ola staggered, breathing hard. The night was still. The curse was broken. He turned to his people, his vision clear. "We are free." A new dawn broke over the ruins, golden light spilling over the land. The past was buried, but the future had been claimed. Ola, the last heir of Olugbade, had risen, not as a puppet of shadows, but as a king of his own making. And the kingdom of the forgotten would live once more. The end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.